to follow on from the discussion we had on Wednesday about the candidates that are splitting the vote in some seats, I'm really pleased that we're joined on the Zoom by Justin Schlosberg of Collective. How you doing? How you doing,
Good.
Justin?
Good, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
It's Crispin, but I'm not
Crispin, yeah.
Andrew. Sorry, I get that. I get that quite a bit. The thing is, we discussed on Wednesday with one candidate. We're trying to stop him from standing because he's splitting the vote in Andrew Feinstein's constituency. These split votes are they still an issue? What's happened since the nominations went in? Have you worked out if there's a lot of seats that are a problem on that?
So I don't think it's a lot of seats by any measure, really. I mean, I think obviously we're battling on a number of fronts, not least the time factor of the snap election, and parties and groups and campaigning groups and candidates having to get organized and get themselves in gear at very late notice. And inevitably, I think in these sorts of situations, I mean, we have certainly, I think, from Collective's perspective, tried to engage as kind of proactively and constructively as possible with both other parties and other candidates who want to stand broadly on an anti-austerity and anti-genocide platform to avoid exactly the kinds of clashes that you mentioned. Inevitably, I think it's not going to be avoidable in every seat. I think there are going to be sometimes particular reasons why a particular group like the Workers' Party or Collective or any independent candidates will still want to stand, regardless of the fact that there's someone on a similar platform, albeit different in some key and sometimes very important policy areas. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I think that the bigger picture here is that the independent movement as a whole would be very, very fortunate to return, less than a handful, maybe even just one or two sitting MPs in the next parliament. The entire system is rigged against independence, and we know it's rigged against socialists. Both the media system, the electoral system. So in a way, from my perspective, important part of what we're doing in this election is offering an alternative and is opening up the conversation and is trying to talk to people about what is happening in Gaza, why we are facing effectively a choice between leaders who either endorse genocide or champion it, and on all sides, and that should hopefully lead to some kind of real transformative change in British politics after the election.
Is it not? Do you not find this frustrating? The splitting on the left. I mean, the groups that there's quite a number of different groups, and then on top of that, you've got local people who are saying, "No, I'm the independent." I mean, this is. I mean, I'm watching it, and this is a horror show. Some of the constituencies are. There's four
Yeah,
candidates, and on the left, there's four non-genocidal candidates, and you
it
just kind
is.
of think,
I mean, it is frustrating. I think in Collective, we've generally supported the principle of local candidates, so not people being parachuted in, local candidates that have local grassroots support. That's generally been our preference. But as I said, at the end of the day, if there is more than one anti-genocide candidate or anti-austerity candidate, then in a way that just widens to some extent the conversation. So I don't see it as a kind of quite as a sort of roadblock or stumbling block, perhaps as you suggested in all cases. I mean, I think obviously where there is a constituency where there is a real prospect of unseating a Labour oratory incumbent with a genuinely anti-austerity, anti-genocide candidate, that is a different matter. But realistically, in most of the seats, what we're trying to do is open up and broaden that conversation. And if there's happens to be more than one candidate, yes, that's unfortunate, but I don't think it's the end of the world.
I mean, one or two seats have been quite controversial. One in particular was Stratford and Bow, because Collective have chosen to support Fiona Lally, and we had on the call Halima Khan and Steve Headley are both standing too, and I think there's another candidate, Omar. I can't remember the surname, but what was your rationale behind supporting Fiona Lally?
So again, I think generally we have been mainly concerned with the candidates that we think have the most grassroots local support and are, a good fit for the kind of politics that we are trying to represent, or at least the political space that we're trying to represent. As I say, we have engaged in proactive and constructive negotiations with other groups. There are other groups, by the way, that are form part of the kind of broader collective movement, if you like. And and where we can, we candidates, some of our prospective candidates have voluntarily stood down, to make way for others when it's felt that maybe another is a better or stronger candidate or has more local support. Sometimes, as in the case of Stratford and Bow, that's not always going to be possible, particularly in a snap election. What we have tried to do, I think, is engage in comradely and collaborative discussions and communications, including on social media. I'm not aware really of anyone involved in Collective as an organizing movement or any Collective backed candidates engaging in what I would consider to be uncomradely discourse attacking other anti-genocide or anti-austerity candidates, or indeed anti-genocide or anti-austerity movements or parties. I think that's extremely important, and I'm fortunately don't feel that I can say the same for all groups and parties who are on that ticket.
Right. Okay. Well, I won't get into a bun fight or whatever on that. But there is something that I have been thinking is Jeremy Corbyn's position. You're backing him, obviously, as we all are in Islington North. There is a feeling, some people saying, I wish Jeremy would endorse candidates himself in other constituencies who are standing as independent. He doesn't seem to have done that. Is that something you would have hoped for?
Look, I've been saying for the last 3 or 4 years, really, that I think Jeremy, quite openly, that I think Jeremy should have been at the forefront of building towards a new party of the left. And yeah, in an ideal world, I would have liked him, and not just Jeremy. I think all high-profile figures on the left to kind of coalesce around a movement that could build towards a new credible and sustainable party of the left outside of Labour. But I do also recognise that for Jeremy and for a lot of other independent candidates in this election, that they do have priorities in terms of their focus on local constituents, and that sometimes talking about things like a broader left movement or a broader or a potential new left party can be a kind of distraction from the kinds of conversations they're trying to engage with in their local areas with their local constituents and the issues that matter to them. I also understand why some independent candidates, including Jeremy, including Andrew Feinstein, for the purpose at least of this election, it's very important for them to make clear that they are standing as independent candidates, that they're not part of a party, whether that's Collective or a movement or group like Collective or Workers' Party, because frankly, there isn't a new, credible, sustainable party of the left in this election. It has to be built from the ground up, and it has to be a genuine, in my view, and I think those of Collective who share my view, it has to be a genuine mass movement, and that's going to take time, and it's not going to happen within the click of a fingers of a snap election.
Yeah, I mean, just to finish, I mean, the situation that we're facing, you say we might only have a handful of independents, if we're lucky in a sense, because of the system. But the need for a new party is certainly what you're thinking about with Collective. With a lot of the initiatives that came across that started in the last few years, they haven't really taken off. Mostly, I would suggest, because Jeremy hasn't backed them, and they've kind of hoped that he would. Isn't that what we're still at? That we still, if we set up a party, if a party is set up, it can't really function unless we get Jeremy, because he's got hundreds of thousands of supporters. It's much more difficult to do it outside of that, isn't it?
I agree with you to an extent. I mean, I think the main reason why perhaps some of the initial attempts to get a new left party off the ground have not succeeded, and I think some of them, some of the existing parties of the left may still not succeed, is because they're not built off the foundations of a genuine mass movement. And I think that what obviously people like Jeremy's endorsement and others would help with is, as you said, to help build that mass movement. But I think irrespective of that, as activists, we should be thinking much more medium and long term, at least towards the 2029 election or whenever the next general election is, about how we lay the foundations for that mass movement. Because the truth is, from my perspective, against the backdrop of a genocide endorsement of both major parties, against a cost of living crisis that has no end in sight, against perpetual war and a ramping up of militarist discourse on both sides of the parliament, on both sides of the Atlantic, there is a unique, rare, historic opportunity to establish a mass movement of radical progressive socialists outside of the Labour Party.
I think there's certainly hundreds of thousands, if not more, people who would go along with that. But we'll have to freeze that till after the election and see how we do. I'm hoping we'll get 10. Mine is 10. My ambition is 10. But we'll see. It's all just work as hard as we can. Isn't that the case? Just do what we can.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, yeah, that for me, and I think for Collective more broadly, if I could speak in any way on behalf of that group, it's twofold. There is an agenda for this election. The agenda is obviously to get as many people sharing our politics into Parliament as we can. I think 10 would be an absolute dream. I personally would be happy with one or two. But I think the secondary and in some ways more important agenda is to start having those conversations in constituencies across the country, to start building something that actually provides maybe people like Jeremy, maybe even one or two left Labour MPs, maybe others who haven't yet put their heads above the parapet, to say, well, look, actually there is something here to get behind. There is a kind of direction of travel. There is a coalescence of energy and ideas, which is the bread and butter of a new movement. So that, I think, is our sort of secondary and, as I said, in some ways more important mission.